I might be a pastor, but I didn't come down from heaven. I came up out of hell with the rest of everybody else. I was formerly in that street life. I know very much about the criminal element, and I can state definitively that the criminal element in and of society would enjoy nothing better than a reduction in police presence and police power. It would allow those with criminal intentions and criminal actions to flourish virtually unchallenged in the communities of America.
Welcome back. That was passionate Pastor Darrell Scott speaking at the House Judiciary Committee hearing on police reform yesterday. Protests across the country have sparked calls for reform, but efforts to defund and disband police departments have also spread across the country now. Joining us now is Dr. Darrell Scott, senior pastor at the New Spirit Revival Center. Pastor Scott, also the CEO of National Diversity Coalition for Trump. He is also the author of the new book, Nothing to Lose, Unlikely Allies in the Struggle for a Better Black America. Great to see you, sir. Let's talk more about your passionate words yesterday on Capitol Hill. You talk about who would benefit from the defunding or abolishment of police. Well, what types of community, what portions of our community would be harmed the most by this movement?
Well, I really believe inner city urban communities will be harmed the most because those are the areas where statistically the most crime occurs. I mean, it would harm the entire city, the entire precincts or whatever, but those communities where crime is a problem, then those are the communities that will be affected the most. Those are the communities that actually need more and better policing, not less policing.
And Pastor, we don't have to just guess. We have examples of what's happened. And yesterday during that hearing, you talked about the city of Cleveland, laid off some 285 police officers and cut the budget by nearly a third. What's been the result of such policies in Cleveland, Ohio?
Well, the result of those policies are once nice areas of the city, once relatively low crime areas of the city have become high crime areas of the city. I grew up in an area of Cleveland called Lee Harvard. When we moved over there, Lee Harvard was one of the nicer neighborhoods in the city. But now, to be honest, it's like Dodge City over there on Gunsmoke. I mean, I really don't even want to drive my car down those streets after a certain time of night because the potential for, you don't even want to pull up to a red light and stop because somebody's liable to come put a gun to you and snatch you out the car. So that's a reality in a number of inner city communities across America. So, and because of a lessening in the police presence, criminals believe that they can get away with things. They have the time to get away with certain crimes that they would not have had time to get away with before. Police response time is low. If they respond at all, it's sad. It's sad, the conditions of some of our American cities because of a lessening in police presence. So I really believe increased funding for police is necessary so that we can have safer communities.
Reform is needed again. You say low-income, minority neighborhoods would be harmed by this and criminals would benefit. Also want to ask you about the push across the country to oust Confederate symbols. And it's really on Capitol Hill as we speak. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling on Congress to remove nearly a dozen statues of Confederate soldiers and officers from the U.S. Capitol building. In a letter to the Joint Committee on the Library, she wrote this: monuments to men who advocated cruelty and barbarism to achieve such a plainly racist end are a grotesque affront to these ideals. Their statues pay homage to hate, not heritage. They must be removed. Last night in Virginia, protesters tore down a statue of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Officials across the country have called for more of these monuments to be removed, and we're seeing them torn down across the country. Pastor Scott, what do you make of this?
Well, if statues are going to be removed, I'd rather they be removed through legislation than through vandalism. I mean, random acts of violence where you just go tear down statues, where does it stop? Next thing you know, who's going to be getting torn down? Statues of Jesus and the Virgin Mary? Because some groups find those statues offensive. We can't allow anarchy to prevail in this country. We are a democratic republic. And so because of that, if through legislation it is decided and determined that the statues be removed, then let the rule of law have its way. But the vandalism, that is not the way to do it. Anarchy is not the way to do it. Crime, violence is not the way to do it.
All right, the president also weighing in, Pastor, on this issue of erasing history, if you will. He voices opposition to renaming military bases, which are named after Confederate generals. Quote, "These monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a great American heritage and a history of winning, victory, and freedom. Therefore, my administration will not even consider renaming these magnificent and fabled military installations. Our history as the greatest nation in the world will not be tampered with. Respect our military." But yesterday, Pastor, the Senate Armed Services Committee, Republican-led, mind you, voted to require the Pentagon to rename the bases and other military assets. Sets up a bit of a collision course between the president and his own party. What would you like to see from the president on this issue?
I mean, the president's reasoning for not wanting to rename the bases sounded very valid to me. I am an Army veteran. I joined the Army in 1976, right after the Vietnam War, and I have some sentimental attachment to some of these bases as well. I was stationed in Fort Gordon, Georgia, but I was very familiar with Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, Fort Hood, Texas. I had friends from those bases, and we have a lot of sentimental memories regarding our military service on those bases. And so, you know, the president's reasoning, it's some valid reasoning. I can see why he would not want to rename them. And plus, you know, we don't want to be reactionary in those activities. Once again, there are a number of veterans that have a sentimental attachment to those, black and white, that have a sentimental attachment to the base itself. And so the president's reasoning, I think, is a very valid reasoning.
All right. Pastor Darrell Scott, great to have you on the program today. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.